I got a wonderful opportunity to work with Arif Mardin at the Hit Factory on a Manhattan Transfer project. I have the chart right here, and it was "La La Means I Love You" was the song, and it was great. It was a dream come true because I had followed his career and followed his productions for years, from the Aretha stuff to the Young Rascals stuff to his solo albums, Journey and Glass Onion. I always loved his arranging and loved his producing, and there he was. He was giving me directions. And I always remember the first rundown, Arif came on the talkback and said, "Fantastic." And then quickly after saying "fantastic," "Let's do another." we did get a track, but that was, I learned, he was that kind of producer. He was always very encouraging and supportive of everything that the musicians did, and he knew when there was a good performance and when there was one more performance coming that was going to be even better than that one. And that's what a great producer does. But he was probably the best at it that I ever worked with, certainly. And in the background in the control room was a young Joe Mardin, his son, who was also a drummer, who I had known about through my friends at Green Street Recording, when they did a Curtis Blow album, and I later did a Salt and Pepper album there. And my friend Steve Loeb, one of the co-owners of the studio, was telling me, "Oh, you got to hear this kid, Joe Mardin. He's amazing. He's up on all the stuff." You know, at that time electronics were coming in, and Joe was the man. He had all this stuff together. Oh, you got to. So I started hearing about Joe Mardin, like, well, look out for this guy, years and years ago. And there he was in the control room, and he was definitely on the scene, you know, and Arif would defer to him, you know, do this, how about this, and he would have suggestions, and together they produced the album. This opportunity to work with Joe Mardin as a producer now in his own right came up in a kind of wonderful way. I know a family in Connecticut where I live, the Balins, Elliot and Susie Balin, and their children, David, Daniel, and Julia Balin, I've known since they were as young as my kids. They were little kids when I first met them, but they were always very musical. They, a couple of years ago, decided to do a record called the Brecker Brothers. It was David and Daniel, and they asked me, you know, who do you know that could produce this? You know, who could help us with this record? And I immediately thought of Joe. And I thought, man, if he was able to produce the Brecker Brothers and pull their stuff all together, he would be great to work with in the studio. And who better than to work with Arif's son? And I listened to other things that Joe had produced, and I thought, this is going to be great. Plus he's a drummer, plus he has great ideas and great concepts. So for me, this is a dream come true. It really is, to be able to work with Joe in this capacity. And this is a dream come true, to work with Joe in this capacity as a producer and a fellow drummer and a great set of ears. Definitely runs in the family. It was also an opportunity to work with his sister Julie as a photographer, who's a great photographer. And the whole thing is dedicated to Arif. And I hope that he would have approved of the results, especially doing 3 of his tunes, with Randy Brecker playing on them, Michael O'Brien playing bass, Kyoko Oyobe playing piano, and Ameem Saleem playing bass, and myself on drums.
So yeah, Chris and I got together when he asked me to produce this record, and we listened to a bunch of Arif's pieces and looked at some sheet music, and 3 pieces resonated with Chris, and he decided that he wanted to call the album Blueprint, which was great. And I've mused a lot recently since having done that as to what Arif might have meant by Blueprint. If it was he loved film noir, I was wondering if it was a reference to maybe some kind of a blueprint to a murder, anatomy of a murder, you know, his love of Duke Ellington, and that Duke Ellington wrote the score to that, or if it was just blue in terms of being a blueprint having to do with the blues. And I think we sort of explored these things without even really realizing it with the musicians. And it was a big responsibility for me, because I had to sort of, Arif Mardin's music is not simple. It may sound easy to listen to, but it's actually not very simple music. It's complex, and I had the dual responsibility of sort of getting a beautiful performance, which wasn't difficult because it was beautifully done and interpreted, but also making sure that we were doing things that were in accordance with his wishes as the writer of the music. So that was a big challenge. But I think when we asked Quincy Jones to write some notes for us in the liner notes, because Quincy was responsible for my father coming to America in 1958 and being the first recipient of the Quincy Jones Scholarship at the Berkeley then School of Music, actually. And Quincy wrote a wonderful few paragraphs for us, not only about Arif and how they met in Istanbul, Turkey, and how he was responsible through the Voice of America for my father coming to this country, but also how he met Chris and how they had worked together in the 70s, and particularly on that session for Patti LaBelle's House Is Not a Home album, right?
Patti Austin.
So I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Patti LaBelle. And how they had worked together on Patti Austin's House Is Not a Home album and at Media. And it's funny because you had worked together on, he had done stuff like sounds and stuff like that a few years earlier.
Right.
But then Chris shows up, the drummer shows up on time for the session. And all the other musicians, which shall remain nameless, but everybody knows who they are, were, fashionably late. And Quincy and you had a few moments to talk, talk about things. But Quincy recounts both Arif and Chris and really ties it all together beautifully and comments on the whole album and the friendships that have existed. And I think that this album represents so many friendships and so many long-term personal friendships and musical friendships, whether it's having Randy Brecker come in, literally in between, sort of international gigs. He came in and played for us on Blueprint, on a ballad, on Filthy McNasty, alternately playing flugel and trumpet, but also your friendship with Will Lee, who came in and was part of the partiers on You Be My Baby. There's so many friendships and relationships with all of those people kind of all brought together because of you on this record. And of course, I grew up watching you and listening to you as a drummer, those sort of halcyon days in the late 70s in New York, early 80s especially, where you had all of these amazing musicians, and Chris is like, it's just sort of like, I say legendary New York session, musician, veteran, but it's so true. And like that time with all of those people, really great for me to be able to be part of that in a way years later to a certain extent, because I was just a little bit young for it. I got to experience it a little bit in the 80s, but it had changed by that point. It wasn't what it was when I was growing up and watching you guys and stuff, and you on SNL. And so it was a great honor for me and a great bookending too in many respects, whether it was that or Quincy and I met Will when I was like 12 years old, and really you brought us all together.